G'day, g'day, welcome back. In today's episode, Barnaby Joyce joins Pauline Hanson's One Nation party. Steve Smith goes crazy on Mr. Archer, calling him champion. And Anika Wells is throwing taxpayer money down the well. All that and more on the Mark Perrotta Show.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Blaster! Welcome to the Mark Perrotta Show.
You might notice throughout today's episode that my voice is going to be cracky, croaky, and all over the place. I've been sick the last couple of days and I've lost my voice as a consequence. I currently sound like a toad. Someone described me as a prepubescent toad earlier because I'm continually testy popping. So we'll get into the news. Most of what we're going to be doing today is clips, so I don't have to speak too much, but I will give some brief highlights on what has been going on. The big one today is Barnaby Joyce has officially joined One Nation. In a radio conference today, Barnaby Joyce joined with Pauline Hanson to announce that he would be joining on to the One Nation party. That means that One Nation now has their first sitting member in Parliament as a consequence. Now, his plan in the next election is to go as a senator for One Nation. So that is stepping back from his parliamentary duties and moving into the Senate. Let's take a listen to his announcement today. It's a bit of a long clip, but it's interesting to see Pauline and Barnaby together.
Waiting on the edge of their seats at the moment to find out what your next steps are going to be. And I believe you've got a bit of an announcement for us.
Well, yes, and first of all, it's something that I've really considered over a long period of time. I'm very aware of that there'll be some hurt in this decision, and I understand that. But I believe that the best thing for me to do for my nation is to be in a place where, without being too sophisticated with my words, efficacious, that is the capacity to go to work and deliver outcomes. Pauline and I have known each other for a long period of time, and with discussing it very closely with Pauline and not rushing into it, Pauline made an offer to me to come to One Nation, and I have taken that up. But now I'm really going to focus back on the Australian people. I'm going to focus back on making sure things such as people who can't get into a house, individuals being regulated out of their freedom, the defence of our nation, which we're really concerned about with the progress of a totalitarian regime in China, making sure that individuals have that right to get ahead in business and get to where they need to be. Make sure that the family is the central component in bringing up children, and it's not the whims of a bureaucracy or the whims of a certain union in the Teachers Federation. That working with people such as Pauline, I think I have a fellow traveller, and I have great respect for the work that Pauline has done. She has driven the political agenda. She has made us, when I was with the coalition, react to where she has gone, and that has been an incredibly positive thing for our nation. The most recent being the immense pressure she put on for the removal of net zero, and now I hope, because we have eviscerated our power grid and sent pensioners to the wall with poverty, that we can start to get some common sense back into it.
Very powerful point there on the pensioners move. So there's a twofold thing that will happen with this. Now, we have an aging population in Australia, a very fast-moving aging population in Australia. That is to say that the voting bloc is going to start shifting towards the older generations. That also comes to midst news that credit card debt has soared across the last few months. Now, we already know that the government effectively only runs at this point on debt. Now the average household is doing the same. And it's not the same as a mortgage. Now, a mortgage is asset-based loaning. That is to say that over the course of the life of your mortgage, your net value does not decrease as a consequence of the fact that you have a loan, as long as you're making your payments regularly. Because the asset that you're backing that with holds the value of that loan. So when you sell it off, you're actually technically making a profit. It's an investment basis. However, what we see problematic with credit card debt is that credit card debt is being used to handle expenses instead of investments. Now, there are several people who use lines of credit for investment because you can find cheap credit cards or low interest or no interest for certain term credit cards where you can get $10,000, play with it for a year on a no interest mortgage. That's the sort of stuff that Barnaby and Pauline are going to be tackling. Cost of living crisis. That also comes amidst the fact that Jim Chalmers has announced today that the $75 rebates, which isn't much, it's enough, it gets you across the line, but we'll be having our last month of those $75 rebates in December. They will not be continuing into the new year. That is a consequence of the overspending by the Australian government. While we're on the topic of overspending, let's take a quick look at this clip from Anika Wells. Now, Anika Wells she's been the minister of a whole lot of things, but more recently she's been really involved with the under 16s social media ban. Now, she's been involved as far as the media front has been concerned. However, over the course of the last few months, she's been pinned left, right, and center for her spending habits. Now, she took a small team out to New York recently for what was a 6-minute speech. In that 6-minute speech, she effectively just touted the under 16 social media ban. Anthony Albanese has since come out and said, it's great because now we've got all of these international partners who are also pressuring the social media giants. And so we're the first movers on this ban. And it's great. It's awesome. The issue is that the first movement theory means that we're now going to have to suffer. This isn't, again, an investment. Okay, first movement in the business space is something that is awesome. Okay, you're the first one in the market, you get name recognition, etc. This doesn't save Australia money. In fact, it's going to cost us billions. The new market specifically around gaming, TikTok's live streams and sharing, and the economy of social media has been boosted and elevated by the social efficacy of children from 14, 15, and 16. We're now also going to run into all sorts of business blockers. This is something that hasn't really been taken into account, is that what happens when a business runs into issues with not being able to access the internet as a consequence of this ban? I think it's going to be problematic if we start seeing entire networks being shut down because of these bans, or issues of business profiles being merged in with personal profiles where suddenly they're going to be locked out because every now and then, you have your bring your kid to work day and they're watching YouTube Kids on the phone. That's another thing. YouTube was one of the first to come out and say, yes, let's go with this under 16 social media ban. We're on board. They also have an entire platform dedicated to children. Now, YouTube isn't social media. It's effectively news and videos. They've already got really, really strict regulations on YouTube. So I don't understand why they're blocked. And it leans into the conspiracy that they're effectively just blocking the things that men and more right-leaning men utilize as a tool and a source of information. Because YouTube is predominantly a male audience. And as part of that, losing access to those news sources where the mainstream media is so left-wing is going to be detrimental to raising conservatives in the future. While products like Blue Sky are touted as only having 50,000 Australian users, however, 50,000 people, that's a lot of people. At the end of the day, that's an entire voting bloc. That's half an electorate. And so when you start to see the way that the money has been used in order to infiltrate, and that was a little thing that we saw in that as well, where Barnaby Joyce hinted to the fact that this is not a parent-pushed, but a union-pushed product. Okay, so this is something that is actually pushed not by mum and dads, right? Because I've not met a single mum or dad who is excited about this at all. They're all nervous. They don't know what they're going to do. They've built an ability of their kids being able to use YouTube, especially safely and reliably. And now we're going to have to go to a state where mum and dad have to change everything they've got to do in order to get through their day. So we'll see how that goes. But when you spend $100,000 to take a couple of people for a 6-minute speech on what could have been a Zoom call, people start raising their eyebrows. And the thing is, it's not like this was a once in a blue moon thing. Over the course of the last 3 to 4 years, Anika Wells has spent an exorbitant amount of money through legal loopholes. What she's done is not illegal, technically. She uses something that is commonly called the repatriation fee. That is to say, when mum or dad who's a parliamentarian needs to go do work in China, we'll pay for you guys to relocate over there, to move yourselves over there. Let's take a look at this clip and we'll see the way that she replies to this line of questioning, and then we'll comment briefly.
Justify spending this amount of taxpayers' dollars?
Well, the reason you know all those things is because we're transparent about them.
You don't think that was expensive for airfares? Over $94,000?
I've answered your question.
Her colleagues continue to defend her.
I think it's fair to say that Minister Wells has been asked this question repeatedly and has answered it very directly. What I'd say is that Minister Wells is leading a work that's not just an Australian first, it's of global significance.
Whether Anika Wells considers nearly $100,000 in airfares to New York excessive remains unanswered, and now more questions are emerging about other trips.
There's a whole lot of coincidence that surrounds Anika Wells' business trips. It just so happens that her business trips happen in the same place as the AFL Grand Final, or in the same place as a friend's birthday party down in South Australia, or somehow in the same place as a ski trip to Jindabyne. Now, there's only so many coincidences that you can start seeing before you wonder, is this planned? This legislation and this expenditure was never meant to be for short-term trips. That is to say, you were never meant to be able to use this to spend $48,000 for your husband to join you left, right, and center whenever you're traveling around the place for a couple of days or for a weekend. This was made for mostly our diplomats who spend anywhere from 6 months to 3 years overseas in another country. Okay, however much we dislike him, Kevin Rudd and his family would need to relocate to the United States as a consequence of his work as the ambassador. And so, the fact that this is still allowed is ludicrous. She's not done anything illegal. But just because it's not illegal doesn't mean that you should go and do it. Yeah. It's ethics, okay, over legislation. Using the taxpayer's dime to spend $48,000 in travel for your husband is ludicrous. It's not like she's the only one that spends money, but even in small amounts, to me, this is fraudulent. This can't be allowed to continue, and the legislation needs to be updated to match what this was meant to do, and to repatriate families for long-term trips. If mum or dad are going away for the week or the weekend, that's part of your job. You know what you're signing up for. The only people who should be there with you, okay, or where this should be allowed, is if you have young infant children. If you have young infant children, preferably you take time off. But if you can't, you're in a high position, okay? You can't just be taking months off at a time. You're breastfeeding. You should be able to take your infant children with you. That's not a problem to me. But her kids aren't infants. Her husband most definitely is not an infant. And so why is she spending all of this money And it just so happens that they're doing a ski trip. Just so happens there's an AFL grand final. Just so happens there's a friend's birthday party. That's what's shady about all this. It is problematic. Unfortunately, making these sorts of little please do's is kind of essential. I enjoy doing it just for the fun of it, but at the same time, if you want to get a message out, you need the people in your community to just comment, like, subscribe, all of the normal jargon, right? Please just take a moment and give me a hand. We need to create a culture of commentary together. And I love the messages coming in my DMs. Put it in the comments section so that everyone else can see it too. Thank you. South Australian Liberal Party has elected a brand new leader. It is the third turnover in the Liberals from a state level and the third woman who has taken charge. Ashton Hearn has been elected unopposed as the leader of the South Australian Liberals, taking over from a fraught moment ahead of upcoming elections. Her leadership campaign stresses cost of living issues, healthcare and crime, and a willingness to repeal the state's legislated Indigenous voice under her leadership. Now in some sad news, a 59-year-old firefighter has died. May he rest in peace. During the tragic and deadly bushfires just north of Sydney. Across New South Wales and Tasmania, dozens of homes have been destroyed so far, and hundreds of hectares of bushland burnt, and multiple fires remain out of control. I watched this really interesting video of a guy from California who was comparing the bushfires and how the trees never seem to light on fire for some reason in and around the homes, but all of the homes are all just decimated. In Australia, it kind of makes sense because the gum trees are sort of built resilient for this sort of thing and for our climate. And I guess to an extent in California, it's the same. They're a desert state as well. The issue with this is that, I mean, the funny thing is when you go look at the carbon impact of those fires, it's actually pretty interesting. But while we're talking fires, we might as well take a quick look at the fires that hit over in Dubbo recently. So a grass fire blew through Dubbo, and this grass fire was right in and around the solar fields that are out there. When these solar fields were affected, somehow simultaneously, they turned off the supply from the grid or from these solar panels, but no impact was felt by the people in the town. So either the flick switch has zero interruption between baseload power and renewables power, or this solar farm was doing bugger all to begin with. Good Lord, I sound like a croaky dog. Let's listen to this clip and let someone who has a voice box explain the situation to us.
Largest solar farms caught fire over the weekend as thunderstorms and heat waves sparked dangerous conditions in New South Wales. A grass fire broke out at Wellington North Solar Farm near Dubbo, spreading across an 87-hectare area. Thick smoke could be seen blanketing the area. The farm's operator says it is still assessing damage to the site. Joining me live now is Dubbo's Deputy Mayor, Philip Toynton. Thank you for your time. Any wrap-up of, I suppose, first of all, the damage here and environmental concerns in the area?
Oh, thanks for having me this afternoon. So what we saw the other day when I drove out there was that I'd come back from Mudgee. I was coming across, a mate rang me up and said, oh, look, that Wellington solar farm's on fire. So I went out there and we got detoured between the Goulma Road and the Saxa Road. So I pulled up there and thought, I'll have a video of this. But from what I could see there, it's just thick smoke. I'm not sure what has caused that fire. But this is the stuff that we've got community groups over here. There's Stop Hampton Park Solar Project. There's another group called Stop Boree Solar at Geary. Now, these are the concerns that these residents have got is if there's an emergency like this, how do they know that they're going to be safe? Like, this is out at the back of Wellington where it's relatively rural. But when you look at where they want to build the Boree Solar Project and where they want to build Hampton Park, that's 2-3 kilometres from the centre of town when you look at Hampton Park. So I'm not anti-renewable, but the industrialisation of prime agricultural land's got to stop, and people have got to have a bit better say as to where these projects are plonked. When we say, oh, look, we're concerned about the fire risks, and we're told, oh, no, it'll be right, like anything had been damaged because it was entirely operational. There should have been a noticeable decrease in power, which would have indicated when someone had thrown an isolation switch to not energise the system. But we didn't see that. So I thought, well, these are all things that are concerning to the residents that are around this area.
That's exactly what we heard just there. The fact that when the isolation switch gets flicked on for these things, and it definitely did because news reports came out this morning that the power was back to 90% for the entire site. And so when we actually think about that, either there was no power coming from those solar panels to begin with, and they're just sitting pretty in the middle of a field taking up prime agricultural land, or alternately, they never flicked off the switch, which means they effectively could have blown up the grid because of a fire. But we know they turned it off. And if they've turned it off, it means there was no power being generated by those solar panels to begin with. And it's not like it was a cloudy day. You saw the footage. It was blistering heat with mad winds to begin with. And so it's another question for the energy market. We might be saying the power is coming from all these renewables, but how much of that is actually true? I can't imagine that there aren't any that are scams at this point. It could be just cardboard boxes in a field. In global news, Russia has kicked off some new attacks on Ukraine, despite what seems to be decent negotiations happening in the background. This might be final power plays for a stronger negotiating position by Vladimir Putin. But I have a distinct feeling that this might actually be a last-ditch effort to just take the thing. And if Russia throws everything, considering the recent EU conversation around backing Ukraine with more than just funds and weapons, then we could potentially be sliding into what would be a devastating decision by Vladimir Putin for the rest of the world. In some sports news, there is a new season of the UFC show coming to Australia. That is Dana White's Contender Series, which is a reality MMA show called The Ultimate Fighter, which many people have spoken about. So it's actually streaming on Paramount Plus, and much of the filming will happen within Australia itself. The UFC has started to go gangbusters here in Australia. I have a feeling that this is going to go even further with this social media ban. People are going to be pushed to more fringe sources of both entertainment, fast-paced still, which the UFC is, entertainment, news, and conservative media. The will for people to be conservative is inbuilt in a way by the time you hit 13. There's already an idea of where you're at. And so the people who already know about Dana White's Contender Series, they're going to keep spreading the word to these other kids and it'll keep spreading out. I think I'm really interested. So Wednesday's the drop dead date, okay, for these social media platforms. The other question that I did have on it was profiles that are under 16 that are not based in Australia. Are they still going to be visible to Australians? I'm not sure. We'll see what happens on the 10th. It's going to be a very, very interesting day. We might see just a meltdown of the internet. We'll finish off with this last clip. I did want to get into Sam Bamford ripping into David Pocock, but when I went and rewatched that clip, he dropped so many F-bombs that it makes my last episode look like it was PG. But he effectively ripped David Pocock a new one. And I like David Pocock, and I literally said it in my last episode that he's a really good senator, so he's an ex-NRL player, became a senator, and I said he's a good case for the fact that too many concussions doesn't make you stupid. But in the case of climate change, that might be the portion of his logic that got knocked out. Turns out he's just funded entirely by Climate 200. So he got something like $850,000 from Climate 200, along with another 100,000 from another green magnate and another 50-odd thousand from another green lunatic. So you understand why he's using his immense popularity for evil in that case, because despite how much he hates lobbying and how much he rails against lobbying, he's now funded by one of the largest lobbying groups in Australia, which is Climate 200. Let's finish off with this awesome clip. Australia took a 2-0 lead in the Ashes yesterday, and it was awesome scenes. England stuck in pretty well between Ben Stokes and Will Jacks, and they really tried their hardest to hold on, but the wickets fell, and it was catch city. England were entirely caught out. They could not. There was glue. Someone needs to check Smith again for cheating. There had to be glue in his fingers yesterday. He took like 3 catches in a row, and they were all spectacular, between the marshalling of himself to the perfect location and that drop down left-hand catch. Travis Head came out swinging. He got out, and then I believe it was Minus Labuschagne came out and also got pinged at the post as well. And then Smith's come out, and he's just gone bang. Jofra Archer came out swinging. And he was swinging for the fences. Man, he was throwing bullets, 150 kilometre plus bullets. Now let's listen to what Stevie Smith had to say. They only had about 30 odd to chase at this point. Jofra's just come in with absolute steamers at Smith, and he had this to say.
That's in the air. It's war on the field. It's a war of words too. Archer, Smith in the air, and it's all the way. The fight between the two will continue.
Steve Smith goes bang, bang, bang. 4-6-1-6. Finishes the match off with a 6 to Jofra Archer. And what he said there is bowl fast when there's nothing going on, champ, because up until now, Jofra had been effectively silent for the entire test match. Now all of a sudden he comes out when there's nothing happening, when he's got no worry about bowling into the rest of the day, and he's just bowling bullets, and he's come out with Now, we've got a few swear words in Australia that are insulting, right? But of all the things that you can say to degrade someone, calling someone champion, that's gnarly. You can't do that. That's like cruel and unusual punishment to call someone champion in Australia. It's this degrading, you're so full of yourself, no one thinks anything of you. It's everything that you could possibly, like lifting you up and then just smashing you into the ground. That'll do. I'm going to go rest my voice box. My name is Mark Perotta. I will speak to you guys on Thursday. Hopefully this sounds a little bit better. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Drop a like, drop a comment, and God bless.